My name is Warren from Generation Media Group, and this is Ableton Basics 101, first episode. I have been a music producer for 10 years here in Ottawa, and I am a professional audio engineer at Viva Recording Studios, also in Ottawa. I have built this beginner Ableton Live course that I've taught multiple people at this point through this course, and I wanted to put it on YouTube for everybody to learn something. This was inspired by a new Discord channel that I've been a part of with some friends from all over the world, it seems, who have all decided they wanted to get into Ableton Live, which is the coolest thing, being an audio engineer and a music producer, seeing a whole bunch of people all collectively come together of all different skill levels learning Ableton Live. So without further ado, we're going to jump into Ableton Basics 101. This first one, what we're going to do is we're going to go over arrangement view and session view, what some of the main knobs and tools do, so that you can get a good idea of what Ableton Live is really like. So let's jump in to the software right here. So you just got Ableton, and you have absolutely no idea what you're doing. You're going to load in this screen here is the arrangement view, and if you look on the other screen here, if you hit tab, the tab key on your keyboard, you'll go to the session view. I mostly work in arrangement view, but this is great for live performances and even productions at first when you want to set in some loops or some MIDIs or something of that nature. You would just throw them in here and you would just click play on it. Each individual channel represents an audio channel or a MIDI channel, each with its own individual settings. You can control the sends, which are these over here, which is basically another track that you can send audio information to. If you're less experienced and more beginner, don't worry too much about this section here. The sends as well are relatively advanced, but the quicker you understand what a send does, the better. So you could send out to a reverb or something like that and then control how much of that signal is getting put through that. Over here you'll see your volume or your audio. This line up in the middle of every one of these meters is the 0 line. Tracks in the yellow here, 1, 2, 3, 4, they'll go all the way up, are your on, off, or bypass. Solo is just how it sounds solo. You can, if you have a whole bunch of sounds in here playing and you solo a track, you will only hear that track, and underneath that it is record. So if you have a MIDI instrument or a microphone that you want to do some recording with, this is how you would arm the track, and you would record with the button here up top. Up here beside it, naturally you'll see stop and play. Loop button is up here. Now these will constantly loop anyway, based off your BPM of the track. Every track will have a BPM, and that'll be in the top left, 120 beats per minute. This is your time signature for 4 or whatever else, whatever other time signature you would like to use. Your metronome can count ins, how long it will till it counts in, change the sound of it or the rhythm itself of the metronome. Something you might not notice right away is you can change the volume of the metronome, and it is down here on the bottom right. That's basically session view. Arrangement view is very similar to that. It's just now horizontal. Once again, audio channels, every individual sound that you put on either an audio or a MIDI channel will have its information here. Naturally, your volume and your bypass on off, your solo and your arm button to record, and these will represent your sends. So these little things down here, these send channels. If you want to put up the send, it's just right here as well. So it'll go 1, 2, however many sends you have, 1, 2, 3, etc., etc., etc. Now, on both the session view here and arrangement view here, you have the list on the left-hand side. If you're me and you've been doing this a while, you've already set up some of your plugins to represent whatever your collections are. As you can see, I have synths and basses, different software synthesizers here on the left. My reverbs and delays that I like are in this one. Compressors and limiters, saturators, EQs, FX, and mastering plugins. Now you totally don't have to use the exact same things that I have used here. But you can find something that works for you. If being efficient with music is really, really important. So the quicker you find things that you really do enjoy using, the quicker your life becomes a little bit easier. Down here you have some sound packs, different things like that. You have different Ableton instruments depending on which version of Ableton you have, whether you have the basic, standard, or suite. You have audio effects that come with Ableton as well, and some MIDI effects. These are all stock to Ableton. And then in your plugins, you will have anything that you've purchased as a plugin over here, all by the different brands and things like that. You can also add in your own folders. Say you have MIDI packs that you really enjoy or something of that nature. You can add the folder and it would go directly to wherever you want to choose said folder. Okay, so now that you have an idea of session view and arrangement view and what some of the things are in here, let's talk about how to put a sound or an element into your track to be able to start making music. So for the purpose of this, I'm going to use session view just because it's what I'm most comfortable with. I can show you the difference afterwards of putting it in here, but I like to be able to see waveforms and MIDI notes in my channel. So super basic of how to actually throw a sound or a sample or something like that in. Go to a sound pack that you have, or if you have a program like Splice, where there's tons of different samples that you can choose from. I'll just use whatever's in Ableton right now. This was from a producer challenge that we've been doing on Discord. Take a sample, let's say we'll use this one. Now it says 120 BPM, C# major is the key. I know that my BPM is 120 beats per minute up here. Not that I can't change it to whatever I like, but for the purpose of this demonstration, I'll keep it at 120. And I will just throw the audio sample, because it is an audio sample, into Ableton Live. Now I like to loop it, just so I don't have to touch it anymore. It just keeps looping over and over and over again. So it'll go like this. Now, you'll notice it's currently distorted, and my master is up at 6 decibels, which is the max that your master can go to. Now, you may look at me like, that's insane, why would you do that? And I'll explain it right now, which is something really important that if you get in the habit of doing right from day one, you'll thank yourself down the road for it. So I put it at 6, and I mix every one of my elements down as I produce a track. So I would bring my volume knob of this specific channel for this just down a little bit. So it's just down like this. And if you need to turn it up on your audio interface or on your volume of your computer, just do it that way. So the more you throw tracks into your project, the volume of this will constantly climb. Now you always want to be mixing down your track and shooting for this little line, which is the 0. The second you start going into the yellow and red, just mix it a little bit farther back down. Now the purpose for this is because when you get to the mastering stage of your production, you need headroom, meaning space before the 0, before the 0. You need some headroom space. See, like there's some empty space here. because you want to be able to bring up your project's loudness, the sound of it, and add some sonic qualities that make it louder but more characterized. And if you've made your beat too loud, when you get to the mastering stage, you don't have any headroom to be able to bring out those elements. So that's why you leave it at 6. So when you make your project and you make your production, and you finally are done mixing it to the best of your abilities, and your master volume is still at 6, just before you go to master the track itself, you make the 6 0, and you've created your headroom. So now you can go in and put your mastering plugins on. You can put your EQ, a compressor, a maximizer, or a limiter, or whatever you feel you need to put on to master your track fully. Now, if you're a beginner, you really won't be at that stage just yet, but I would recommend every project that you start from day one, finish, go through every one of the steps, because the last thing you want to do is get, really good at production and never get into the mixing and mastering stage, unless you always want to pay somebody for that, and that's fine too. But if you want to learn how to make music, why not learn all of it? So from day one, produce, mix it, and master it, and in no time you'll be a fantastic engineer. So that being said, it's at 6. I mixed everything down. We threw in an audio sample. Fantastic. There it is. And what we'll do now is figure out how to put a MIDI in. So let's say we want, this is more of an advanced tip, but kind of cool. So let's say we want to take this pattern and put it in a synthesizer. So let's take this. Wow. Let's take this sample and put it into a synthesizer. So what you can do is you can click it and right-click it, convert harmony to new MIDI track, or convert melody to new MIDI track. Now, it's not a melody, it's a harmony, so we're going to use that. So it's going to bring in into an Ableton all the MIDI notes right there. So I don't necessarily want to use this, so I'm going to turn it off. But there's your MIDI notes, and they're all right here. And that was another thing I should probably mention. Down here in your Ableton project, you'll see your audio sample. You'll see a few different elements that you can change. You can warp it to a new BPM. You can do a few different things. When you're working with samples and when you're warping samples, there'll be a couple different modes here: beats, tone, texture, repitch, complex, and complex pro. I personally recommend leaving complex on, because you're going to find that it makes the samples warp and sound a lot better when you're putting a sample of a different BPM into Ableton Live. And from day one, what you can do is you can hit, if you're on Mac, Command, comma, or if you're on PC, Control, comma. And you can go into Record, Warp, and Launch, which is on the left, and set your default warp mode to complex. And thank me later, it just sounds great. Your transposition of the sample, you can go up the key. So if this was C sharp major, you can go to D major, or D sharp major, or E major, etc., or the other way. You can change the individual cents in between the notes. As well, there's volume, a reverse, time signature, naturally, your groove, which we can talk about in another lesson, and that's pretty basic for now. If you have any questions, let me know about this specific. So that was the audio. On this channel down here, you'll see the audio, and over here is where you would throw any plugin that you want. So we've converted the sample into a harmony. I'm going to turn that off, and now you'll notice it's not playing anything, and that's because there's no instrument actually in here. You'll see the piano roll here, but you will not see anything playing because there's no instrument. Now I'm going to throw in something stock to Ableton, just because everybody should have it, and let's just throw analog in. And there you go, there's a sound, albeit not a great one, but there's a sound. Now when converting MIDI from a sample. You'll notice it's not always perfect, and that's kind of where you'll have to come in and figure out what exactly you want in it as far as notes go. It's as simple as highlighting them and deleting them. Something cool about this piano roll is whatever you actually have in here, you can fold this button up here so it only is playing the keys that have the notes in them. Another cool thing is you can hold shift and up on the keyboard and it will go up a full octave, or naturally if you're highlighting all of them, you can just go down for one note. But because I'm going to work in C sharp major, I'm going to leave it where it is, and if I just wanted a higher pitch, or higher octave I should say, shift up arrow. So that's the basics of MIDI. You can size and resize. You can move the MIDI notes as you see fit for your production. The other thing that you can do is, if they are a little bit off, let's say like that's a little bit here, and that's over here, and that's over here, if you highlight them and hit Command A or Control A, so that's select all. So if I click off, Command A or Control A would be select all, and Command U or Control U is quantize. So quantizing means it's snapping it to the grid. So you can snap to anything really. Like if you want to come in here and you hit Control U or Command U, I should say, or both, you'll see it snapping to the grid. So as far as that goes, that's the basic of setting up and putting sounds into your Ableton Live project. That's the basics of arrangement and session view. Each one is great for its own purposes, and there's crazy creative ways to do just about anything that you need to in Ableton Live. The last thing that I want to talk about in this basic training, episode 1 of our basic training, is how to save a template set. Now, if you're a person like me that thrives off efficiency and just being able to jump into my project, and I already know that I have the main things already set up, so I don't stunt the first half of my creativity by trying to set up the project. I'm going to show you how to set up a template set. Now we do this by naturally setting up your project. I'll show you how I do it with mine. Now it might be a little bit overwhelming, but I'll kind of dumb it down a little bit just so that you get an idea of how to go about it. So first you kind of have to ask yourself, what are the main parts of the track, or what are the main parts of a song? So one would be drums, one would be chords, one would be bass, one would be kick. Now I know that I process my kick and my bass together, so I group those and call that kick, bass. So whatever I put on this group channel will affect both of these. Now I will process them individually different and then end up EQing and compressing them. Now I know that might be a little bit advanced, so I guess for the purpose of this, let's ungroup this. So here's a kick, here's a bass, here's drums, here's chords, and we'll just leave it like that. So there's 4. Don't worry about send tracks for now, although if you are a keener, watch a future video and we'll go over what a send track actually is. So let's say you have these are what you wanted. You know that you're working with a kick, a bass, some drums, and a chords. You want to save this template set. You would hit Command comma or Control comma, again if you're on PC. And you go to File and Folder, this tab on the left, and save current set as default. So every time you open Ableton Live, this is the template set that would show up. So I'm not going to do that naturally because I already have one, which I can show you. I'm not going to save that, but I'll show you what mine kind of looks like, just maybe so you can get an idea of how I do mine. Just maybe that'll help you. And I'll walk you over why it's set up the way it is. Master, as I spoke about, is 6 decibels all the way to the top, and everything gets mixed down. My kick and bass get processed together. So if I want a kick sample or a kick synthesizer. I have both options here depending on how I'm feeling. Now those are grouped in their own kick group inside a kick bass group. So whatever, say I had two kicks, one was a synthesizer, one was not, everything in the kick group is affecting both of these kicks, but not the basses. So the bass is in its own group as well. So if I want to add another bass, let's say I want to duplicate that bass and have something else, 2 instances of Serum, there you go, there's 2. Everything in that bass group, all processing on the bass group gets affected in both bass and this bass as well. Now I process them together, so my kick and bass I would EQ and compress afterwards when I'm nearing the ending of my project. And here you go, you do all the processing just in here. So my drums, I have a regroover in case there's a drum groove and I want a certain part of it out. So you put a loop from Splice or something like that where you really like the snare but you didn't like anything else, you can throw it into a plugin called Regroover and you can take that out. Clap and snare, because that's a main part of your track. The highs, which would represent any top loop or hi-hats or closed hats. There's the percussions, so any perc loops or perc stab hits or anything like that. And then there's some crashes and different effects like reverse crash or anything else that I find takes up that kind of high frequency range in the form of a crash or an impact. Now you have chords and synths in a group. Any synths or pianos or anything like that that I feel would go in my track. I work a lot with deep house and trance, so there's tons of these happening, so there they are already set up for myself. And then there's plucks, which would be any of my melodies or arpeggiators or things of that nature. Vox, vocals, I have it split up to chorus, verses, harmonies, and ad-libs. So anything that I want, I set it up there. And FX would be risers and sweeps, anything to build or reduce energy in your track for a drop or for an outro or anything of that nature, it would be there. And background noise, so just these odd stabs or Foley sounds like birds in a park or something like that, anything to create a space or an atmosphere that your track lives in would be there. Now I set up a lot of sends because I send a lot of my signals to these. If you're using sends, it creates a harmony in your track, and not harmony in the sense of like a musical harmony, more in the sense of they're all working together because they're using the same effects to make up each one of the sounds. So on a plate reverb, I would send most of my drums to this one plate reverb so they have this kind of natural unity of a sound with that reverb that goes on it. Now there's a room reverb as well as a long reverb, multiple different delays which can be switched whenever I so choose. One hard compressor in case I just need that extra little pump to it, an exciter, and a doubler. And these are just what I like, what I've found to be really useful in my tracks, and create the distinction that I like in my own tracks. Now you can take this a step further and on every one of the tracks throw something like an equalizer, like your EQ8 if you're just on stock and just starting out, or something more advanced like a FabFilter Pro Q3 or any filter that you like at the beginning, just so that when you're loading in you're already cutting the frequencies that you want, so it's already there for you. Now keep in mind the depending on your computer specifications, the bigger your template set is, the longer Ableton's going to take to log in. So in a sense, it may stunt your creativity a little bit, but you're going to have to be the judge of that for yourself. So that was Ableton Live Basics number 1, setting up the DAW and a template set and just kind of getting a good idea of what Ableton's all about and where things are, so you can kind of start making music relatively easily. Now I'm going to do another episode and it's going to be on making a track. Some of the things that we already talked about the audio samples, we're actually going to get into making a beat from scratch. We're going to talk about how to loop things, what to do at the very beginning of your track, what to look for, and some little mistakes that you might make at the beginning. We're going to try to make sure that you don't do that. So this has been Warren at Generation Media Group, doing Ableton Live basics for all you people that want to learn.